So this happened just a few weeks ago. I've told myself not to overthink it, but I still get chills just talking about it. I mean, you know me, I'm usually pretty rational. I can handle a spooky movie, no problem. But this was different. It was real. All right, so picture this. It's a Saturday night and I'm home alone. My roommate was out of town and I had the whole place to myself. I figured I'd just watch a movie, order some food, and call it an early night. Around 8 p.m., the food showed up, a big pizza with all the works. And I hunkered down in the living room, flipping through Netflix, the rain pattering on the windows. Perfect night in, right? But then, halfway through my movie, I heard this weird scratching sound coming from the back door. It was soft, just enough to get my attention, like a slow scrape against the doorframe. I paused the movie, figuring it was probably just a stray branch scraping the siding or something. I live in an older house, so noises like that happen all the time, but the scratching didn't stop. It was steady and oddly deliberate. I got up, phone flashlight in hand, and headed over to the back door. The scratching stopped right as I reached it, but I swear, I felt something on the other side of that door. I stood there for a minute, my ear practically pressed against it, holding my breath. Silence. Just the wind, I told myself. Or maybe a raccoon, that's all. But something about it didn't sit right. I took a deep breath, went back to the couch, and tried to focus on the movie. 15 minutes later, there it was again. Scratch, whoop, scratch, whoop, scratch. Now I was officially freaked out. My stomach was doing flips, and every instinct told me to call someone, but I didn't want to look paranoid. So instead, I went upstairs to my room, locked the door, and tried to shake it off. I kept telling myself it was all in my head, but then I noticed something else. My phone, which had been fully charged earlier, was now at 5% battery. Maybe you're thinking, so what? Phones die all the time. But I'd barely used it, and I keep my battery healthy. But whatever, I tried to brush it off, plugged it in, and sat down on my bed. But now, my room didn't feel like my room. I know that sounds weird, but it was like the walls themselves were pressing in on me. The air felt thick, heavy. Even the silence was different, like it was holding its breath. That's when I heard footsteps. Not scratching this time. Footsteps, moving down the hall, slow and steady. My heart was in my throat. I told myself it was just the house settling, but these footsteps were too deliberate, too heavy to ignore. Then, just outside my bedroom door, they stopped. I sat frozen, barely breathing, when the doorknob started to turn. Slowly, slowly, with this dreadful creak. I was rooted to the spot, every part of me screaming to do something, scream, hide, anything. But all I could do was stare. The door opened just a crack, and through that narrow gap, I saw an eye. Not just any eye, it was bloodshot, wide and frantic, like it hadn't blinked in hours. Then came the whisper, "I found you." My heart nearly exploded out of my chest. I scrambled backward, knocking over my nightstand. The figure behind the door just chuckled, this low, gravelly laugh that I swear sounded like it came from the pits of hell itself. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. I was trapped. That's when it stepped fully into the room. It was a man, tall and lanky, with long, filthy hair and a grin that stretched wider than any human should. His clothes were tattered, and his skin was this sickly gray, almost like he'd been living in a basement for years. "I've been looking for you," he rasped, tilting his head in a way that was both curious and menacing. I didn't know what to do. My body was in full panic mode, but something kept me frozen there, watching him. And then, something weird happened. He stopped, his grin faltering. He sniffed the air and a look of confusion washed over his face. This isn't right, he mumbled to himself, his eyes darting around the room, like he was trying to find something. Wait, this isn't your room, is it? I blinked, stunned. He looked genuinely puzzled, his expression shifting from menacing to embarrassed. I'm sorry, he stammered, backing up toward the door. This wasn't supposed to happen. Wrong person, wrong house. I'll leave. And just like that, he was gone. The door swung shut behind him, leaving me in a state of utter shock. I heard him muttering as he walked back down the hallway, his footsteps growing fainter until they finally disappeared altogether. I sat there, stunned, my brain struggling to process what had just happened. I kept waiting for him to come back, to try again, but the house was silent. No more scratching, no more footsteps. After a few minutes, I mustered up the courage to creep down the stairs and check the front door. It was locked, and there was no sign of anyone outside. It was like he'd just vanished. It wasn't until the next morning that I found the note. It was on the kitchen counter, a scrap of paper with scrawled handwriting. Sorry about the mix-up. Wrong soul. I'll be back for you, eventually. Needless to say, I haven't been able to sleep right since.